हरि ओम।
सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनीवतानमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। गीता ध्यानम्। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनी अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्रा येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवैत्रीकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दुग्धा गोपालनन्दना पार्थो वत्ससुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरननडि कैवर्तक केशव पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटम् नानाध्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितम् लोके सज्जन षट्परैरहरहः पीपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद् पंकजं कलिमला प्रध्वंसिन श्रेयसे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवै वेदे साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यं सामगा ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Hari Om. So we saw that Karma Yoga purifies the mind and intellect. How does it do that? Let's analyze this a little bit. The purity of the mind and intellect is measured by its goodness. If the mind intellect instrument is good, quote unquote, that means it is pure. We'll all agree to that. The more the goodness, more the nobility, more the purity. And at the same time, less the goodness, less the nobility, or the mind is ignoble, and less the purity. It is impure. We saw last time that there are fundamentally two types of purities or impurities rather. The second type, which is actually impurity which is there within the mind, where our own mind is throwing up negative thoughts from within, and then it propagates, outside in the environment. When the mind intellect, it's impure from within, and it also sullies the peace which is there. These were of fundamentally of 6 types, or the Shadripu. A quick revision of those: Kama or desire, Krodha or anger, Lobha, greed, Moha, which is delusion, Madha or pride or hubris, arrogance, and Matsarya, which is jealousy or envy. It's actually KLM. Krodha and Kama, Lobha, Moha, Madha, and Matsarya. And the another kind of impurity is where the mind intellect instrument is weak, where it is unsteady because of the weakness. And when that happens, the response to stimulus from outside is very disturbed also. The reaction, the response actually becomes a reaction, and the reaction is in the form of agitation, restlessness, lack of focus, lack of concentration, lack of alertness, and so on and so forth. And the inner strength of the mind intellect instrument comes from its own past resources. When we say its own past resources, from its own punya and papa, from its own merit and from its own sins. We saw that punya or merit is nothing but that peace and the calmness within the mind, and the papa or the sin is nothing but internal disturbances. And these inner aspects, the resources that are there in the mind intellect, they then contribute to the strength of the mind intellect instrument. And the behavioral tendencies of a human being, they also come from punya and papa. More the papa, more the ignoble or sinful tendencies that manifest in the behavior of the person. Which means more the mind or intellect is intellectually or mentally disturbed within, more the manifestation of behavior which is not in consonance, right? And more the punya, more the meritorious or noble tendencies that get displayed in the behavior. What are punya and papa? Just to repeat: the internal calmness, the equanimity, the peace, and the internal disturbances. That is what punya and papa are. Now, punya can be expended for pleasure, or it can be used to transform the mind and intellect. What you sow, so shall you reap. We also learned that Bhagavan Sri Krishna told Arjuna, and through Arjuna to all of us, that do not sow with the thought of what you would be reaping. The attitude of my offering to you, O Lord, my offering to you, O higher ideal, anything that you establish and you set up as higher ideal is Bhagavan, is the Lord. And the attitude of offering to the higher ideal, that leads to a sense of goodness within. Because you are doing this for the higher ideal, the holistic approach that you are taking. And it leads to a sense of holiness within. You know, recently I attended a yoga session by Petra, and in which she actually, it's a yoga nidra session, and in which she actually helps us count out all the internal disturbances and the internal goodnesses, and then let go of them. So it was a beautiful experience. Essentially, how do we bring that goodness within is what is the key to a calm and peaceful mind that is focused on performance. And when we do our duties, when we perform action expecting nothing, we get everything. When you don't want, you get more than what you could have ever imagined. When you want, you will get what you wanted. So whenever we establish a ceiling, we hit the ceiling. But whenever we don't think of that ceiling, we could reach much beyond. So, I mean, one of the things that this reminds me of is, I have started a few companies from ground up in my professional career. And each and every time, when, these media people talk to you in terms of what you are doing, what are your activities, and what are your goals, how many people will you grow into? What are your revenue goals? What will you finish this year? My response always was, I have no idea. I have some kind of business plan, which we all work towards. I can share that business plan with you, but I really don't have a goal that I have set up, that this is the number of people we will be, this is the revenue we will be after so and so period of time. And I always found in my career that whenever I did that, obviously, when we are working, we have some kind of an imagination of what's going to happen. But when I didn't have that kind of a limitation towards which I was working, I always succeeded, and it was more than what I could have ever imagined. Or what all of us, the team that we were working together, could have ever imagined. I told you, I shared with you a little bit about my career in the past, right? And I went to the army, and from the army I came out. I did lots of various kind of work in the after I left the army. I started off with administration, then I was in HR, and then there was this, I was in a meeting with and I used to report to the managing director of the company. I was one of the managers or department heads, and they were talking about opportunity to do a technical project. And everyone, all the technical heads in the organization were up to their noses in terms of what they had to deliver. So this opportunity was there, but there were no takers to deliver to that opportunity. Now, I'm not an engineer by learning, by study. So this discussion was going on, and it looked like that the project will go away, okay, because there was really no bandwidth for the organization to take it up. So after the end of the meeting, I went to my boss. I said, sir, can I take responsibility for this and deliver? And, he was like looking at me and must have crossed his mind, how is this guy going to do it? He's my admin HR guy. How is he going to do it? And he didn't even respond to me. I came back, and honestly, I felt bad that I had asked for something which was probably beyond, much beyond. And God knows what my boss thought. But after a week, I was surprised that he came back to my room and said, would you like to do that? And I said, of course I would like to. And he was like, how would you? I said, you give me your best engineer, a mid-level resource is good enough, but needs to be technically very good, because I don't have a clue about technology. I can't write any line of code. But I'll do management, I will run the project. So if you give me your best engineer, I'll be able to get this done. And, things went ahead. I was lucky. We were all lucky. Project went extremely well. We were actually recognized for it, and so on and so forth. And, looking back now, 25 years, that was about 27, 28 years ago, 22, 23 years of running technical teams, somehow or the other, it changed my entire life. I didn't know what I was asking. I just went and, I don't know if there was a desire in me. I don't even know. Yes, I was ambitious. I wanted to do, there was a lot of drive. I was a youngster, maybe 23, 24 years old. And, I asked, I don't know, I don't even know what, but it shaped my entire life. I mean, all I've been doing for the last 25 years is managing technical teams. So when we do action, when we take action with desire, without desire, with a goal, without a goal, please always, we must remember that it has some kind of influence in shaping our life, shaping our future. So as long as we are aware of that, we will know what we want, and we will see a lot more of this as Bhagavan Sri Krishna, gets into specifics. Now, we also saw last time that the Vedas have everything. Okay, it is a repository. It has knowledge about everything that you need to know. Vedas will tell you how to achieve when you have a desire, how to achieve when you don't have desire. It will tell us everything. It is a complete repository, and we have to choose wisely from the Vedas. I mean, if I were to ask you today's modern Veda, what is it? If we were sitting in a live class, if COVID was not there, I would have paused for some time to get some reaction. But in Zoom, it's not possible. But if we were to say, what is today's Veda? Today's Veda is the internet, www, the World Wide Web. Google Guru is part of that World Wide Web. Okay, we have to search wisely, because the World Wide Web will throw up anything and everything. It is up to us how we search. It is up to us how we dip into that, massive reservoir of knowledge, reservoir of information actually, because we are the ones who convert it into knowledge. And how do we use it in our lives? Similarly, the Vedas are a massive reservoir of information and knowledge. And how we use it, what we choose to learn from it is entirely up to us. It is excellent to know the entire Vedas. If we know the entire Vedas, which probably is not humanly possible in one life, unless someone is extremely inclined and brilliant, it's amazing, it is awesome. But even if we know the Vedas, it is important to pick and choose what we want, how we want, and how do we use what we have got from it. So in Karma Yoga, we are doing what we are doing anyway. We all know that. Nothing changes in terms of action. What changes? It is the buddhi, the attitude of doing the action that changes. Now, desireless, okay? Now, desireless is a scary word. I've been using different terms here. I've also said what we want, what we don't want. What we want, does it mean that there is desire? Okay? And if we have desire, does it mean that, we are not going to have Ishvara Arpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi? So we will see more of that. Desireless is a scary word for most of us. Now, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, he tells Arjuna how to be desireless in the next verse. So we will read the next verse, the first verse for today.
Traigunya Vishaya Veda.
Traigunya Vishaya Veda.
Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna.
Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna.
Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto.
Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto.
Niryogakshema Atmavan.
Niryogakshema Atmavan.
Traigunya Vishaya Veda. Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto. Niryogakshema Atmavan.
Traigunya Vishaya Veda, or let us just turn it around a little bit. Veda Vishaya Traigunya, that portion of the Vedas which deals with action, which deals with Karma Kanda. Remember, we talked about the 3 Kandas in the beginning. The Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, the subject matter of that section, the Vishaya of that section, the subject matter of that section is the Trigunya. What are the Trigunyas? The Trigunyas are Tamas, Rajas and Sattva or Sattva. So we'll just spend a couple of minutes to examine what the Trigunyas are. And I'm going to use a few elements to describe the Trigunyas. I'll talk about their texture. I'll talk about their state, the condition in which the gunas exist, the expression, how the gunas express themselves, and the result of that expression. So these 5 elements we will use. Okay. So the Tamas Triguna, the Tamas Guna, that essentially the texture is dull, inactive. The state of its existence is indolence, carelessness. That is the state of its indolence. Its condition usually is there is no consistency of purpose. It flits. Remember Bahushakha? Many branched. It flits from one thought to the other thought, flits from one desire to another desire. No consistency of purpose. The emotions themselves are not amiable. Its expression is inaction, inactive. And the result is said to be the next birth of the person with this kind of a guna is normally said to have an animal birth. And if we don't want to go to the next janma, to the next birth, okay, if a lot of people today do not know whether to believe or do not believe or believe, whatever it may be, let's talk about this life. In this life, it results in lower pleasures. Okay, that we have seen. The more the dull you are, the lower the pleasures that you get. The joys and the pleasures are at a much lower level. The Rajas guna is a passionate and agitated texture. Okay, there is a lot of passion, a lot of agitation. The state in which it exists is stormy state. You will find, a lot of disturbance, a lot of storminess in that state. The condition is that it is typically bursting with emotions, overpowering desires, restless, bursting with emotions. And the expression is objective activity, which means objective means things which are outside of us, seeking a lot of what is there in the object world. A lot of objective activity. That is the expression. And the result of this guna or the person or the individual with this guna is said to be a human birth in the next janma or within this janma, higher pleasures. Okay? Because you are more active, because you are more passionate and agitated, you put in a lot of effort. Yes, of course, there is desire, but the effort is also equal to the desire. A lot more desire, more the effort, and the pleasures are much more. In the Tamas guna, lower desire, lower state, indolence, lower the pleasures. Okay. The Sattva guna is, in terms of texture, pure and noble. The state in which it exists will be more in terms of equanimity. You will find more stability, more serenity in the state of existence. And the condition that it displays is of balanced equipoise, more contemplative. You will not see too much passion, too much expression. There won't be emotional outbursts. There will be more contemplation. And the expression of this guna is more in terms of subjective activity. So dwelling, exploring within. Remember, we talked about exploration outside. When you explore, when you send a ship to Mars to explore the surface, that is objective exploration. Subjective exploration is when we go within and explore the self. That is subjective exploration. So the activity is more of subjective activity or unactivity. Now this unactivity is a very interesting term. Inactivity is where you do nothing. Unactivity is where there is a lot of action going on, but that action is not very visible. For example, when you get a fan to run, when it's running at slow speed, you can see the blades. When it is stationary, you can see the blades. But when it's running at really high speed, you don't even see the blades. Oftentimes you see right through the fan. So that is an action where there is a tremendous movement, but it appears still. So this guna, the appearance is of a stillness, but a lot is going on. And if you get to know the individual much better, you will see the amount that is going on. And the result of this guna is either a godly birth, if you want to talk about the next Janma, or deeper happiness, not pleasure, but deeper, long-lasting happiness. So, Bhagavan says, seek none of these three gunas. Traigunya, Vishayaveda, Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. Nistraigunya, seek none of them. Attitude of wanting none of these bhavas is what he tells Arjuna when performing the action. So Nistraigunya Bhava is also the same as Nishkama Bhava. Nishkama means without any desire. Okay? Desire on any of these three levels. And how do we do that? Bhagavan gives 4 beautiful tips to do that in this verse. The first one is Nirdvandvaha. Dvandva means duality. We talked about duality last time. Sukha dukkhe same kritva labha labhav jaya jaya. Sukha dukkha labha labhav jaya jaya. Right? So the joy and the sorrow, the profit and the loss, the victory and the defeat, these are the extremities. These are the dualities. Nirdvandva means without these duality. What do you mean without this duality? Keep your mind free from dwelling in these extremities, dwelling in these pairs of opposite. What will happen if I win? What will happen if I lose? Keep your mind free from those kind of thoughts. Do not be shaken by them. And when that happens, there will be win, there will be loss. Okay? There will be sadness, there will be happiness or joy. When that happens, be calm, be equipoised in their presence. Do not dwell on them when they are not there. And when they are there, be equipoised in their presence. The second tip that Bhagavan gives is Nitya Sattvastaha. Sattvastha here means firmness, stability, the inner strength. So Nitya means forever, everlasting. Be firmly rooted and established always is what the tip is from Sri Krishna. And be firmly rooted and established in what? In the Vyavasayatmika Buddhi. That inner resolve, that determined resolve. The determined resolve. So be firmly established in the determined resolve to pursue Karma Yoga, to pursue Buddhi Yoga. Which is that whatever we do with Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, and whatever we get, we receive with Prasada Buddhi. In fact, when we say determined resolve, it's like taking a vow. So take a vow that this is what I will do. This is how I will work. Oftentimes, taking a vow helps. The third tip Bhagavan gives is Nir-Yoga Kshema. Yoga Kshema means acquiring and preserving. That is what Yoga Kshema means. Yoga is alabha dasya labha. What has so far not been gained? Alabha dasya labha. I am seeking. So alabha dasya is what I do not have. Labha is I want that. So seeking, an effort to gain what one does not have is called yoga in this context. Okay? And even in any form of yoga, we are always striving to get to a level which we do not have. So the effort to try and gain what we do not have is yoga. And kshema is labhadasya rakshanam. What I already have, I need to protect. Protecting what I have already gained. So Bhagavan says the mind should not be occupied. Mind not being occupied in either yoga, which is acquiring what I do not have, or kshema, which is protecting what I already have. Do not keep your mind in any of these two. And do not keep this yoga kshema, acquiring and protecting, as the goal of your action, as the goal of what you're doing. Do what you have to do, just for the sake of doing what you have to do. And the fourth tip Bhagavan gives is Atmavan, your mind and intellect fully in the Supreme, Paramatma, fully occupied there, with bhakti, with devotion. That is the fourth tip that Bhagavan gives. So beautiful it is, Nirdvandvo, Nitya Sattvastho, Niryoga Kshemam Atmavan. If we do these four things, what will happen? We will ensure that we do not exist in the realm of the three gunas. So one of the very interesting things that I've read is by this gentleman, Jean Vanier. Jean Vanier actually passed away about a year ago, ripe old age of 90. He was the founder of an organization called L'Arc International. Now he has some fantastic books. If you Google him, you will see that. Okay, and he talks about various. There's a treasure trove of ideas, of reflections on how to lead a good life. And there is this book, Tears of Silence, by Jean Vanier. There he says, and I'm going to read this out. He says, "He who clutches desperately to the security of everyday habits, that is your work, organization, friends, family, no longer lives. More than security, life needs adventure, risk, dynamic activity, self-giving, and presence to others." Now, combining this with Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto Niryoga Kshema Matmava. Combining this with that, what do we see? If we have to live a life of adventure, if we have to live a life of dynamic activity, in whichever environment we are in, with our family, with our friends, within our organization, in the work that we do, if we have to do that, one needs to give up that clutching, that selfish, desire-ridden existence. Nirdvandvo, Ditya Sattvasto, Niryogakshema. We need to give it up. If we give it up, this happens. But on the contrary, what do we see around all of us? Human beings have desperately clung on, to the extremities. They have clung on to them in the mini-branched way, without being firm, flitting from one thought, one idea, one desire to the other. And they have clung on to it by protecting what they have, desiring what they do not have. That is what we see all around us. And as a result, this life of dynamic, people who live life dynamically, people who live life in the manner that we just saw, they've almost become misfits in society. Because the other society has become so common that the dynamic existence has become a misfit. If I suddenly say that I'm going to go spend the next 6 months in the Himalayas, everybody will like, "Hey, what are you doing? Don't go." I'll become a misfit, But that would be a dynamic existence. Even 2 weeks there is unbelievably reinvigorating. So there was this kingdom, which had 2 wells. One of the wells was for the Raja, the king, the ministers and the families of the king and the ministers. The other well was for everybody else, all the citizens, the subjects of the kingdom. One day there was a magician who got very angry with the people in the kingdom and he poisoned one of the wells, which is the well of the people. That got poisoned. So poison means what? Not the poison which kills you. This poison made people who ever drank water from the well mad. So if you drink water from the well, you become mad. So people used to drink, whoever drank became mad. And the others saw this and said, "Hey, what's going on?" So you stop drinking. But that's the only well. There's no other potable water in the kingdom. If you don't drink, what will happen over a period of time? You'll fall sick, you can die, and so on and so forth. So people started dying. So the choice was either you drink and become mad, or you don't drink and die. So then slowly and surely people drink, because you can't exist without drinking water. So over a period of time, the entire kingdom became mad. Now, all the people, the citizens of the kingdom were mad, and the king, the ministers and the families were sane. But the beauty of madness is that the people who are mad think that they are sane. And the people who are sane are the ones who are actually mad. So the entire kingdom thought, we are sane people. These rulers are mad. What happened to them? They are crazy. Why are we allowing them to rule over us? Let's get rid of them. Now this stupefied the king, the ministers and their family. What do I do? Now either I'll be thrown out or I'll be killed. I don't have a choice. So they conferred among themselves. And finally the idea was either you have to leave the kingdom and run away, But running away outside, what will happen? No other kingdom is going to welcome them. This is their kingdom. They want to be kings. So the only option it was decided was, let's also drink the water from the well. So the king and the ministers and the families drank the water from that poisoned well, and all of them also became mad. And this entire kingdom of mad people, the entire kingdom of sane people ruled and lived happily ever after. Okay? So this is our world. The selfish have prospered and the selfless have become selfish. This is what has happened in this. And why does this happen? The reason this happens is because people have this fear. And what is this fear? The fear is that if I become selfless, if I become desireless, whatever I have, that will also go away. Now with desire, at least I'm getting something. Okay, I have some wants, I have some desire. I have those wants and desires. I work for those wants and desires, and I'm able to acquire what I want. If I give this up, I will not have anything. And that is a big fear. Probably the biggest fear next to death. You must go through, we talked about this earlier, the pyramid, the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We talked about it earlier. So, the base security, that this is something that if I want, I get it. How do I not want it? Is a big problem. Now, Bhagavan Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that it would not be so in the next verse.
Yavanartha udapane.
Yavanartha udapane.
Sarvatas samplutodake.
Sarvatas samplutodake.
Tavan sarveshu vedeshu.
Tavan sarveshu vedeshu.
Brahmanasya vijanataha.
Brahmanasya vijanataha.
Yavanartha udapane. Sarvatas samplutodake. Tavan sarveshu vedeshu. Brahmanasya vijanataha.
See how relevant Bhagavad Gita is, what was taught centuries ago by Bhagavan to Arjuna. It is even relevant, so much relevant today. We saw how, the world has evolved where the selfish have prospered and the selfless have become selfish. See, Udapana. Udapana means a small water body, like a well or a stream that is flowing through a village. Okay? And Samplutodaka. Samplutodaka is a massive water reservoir, like a huge lake. Okay? Massive river, huge river, like where you see river Ganga or Kaveri flowing, at its best. And the other bank appears like miles away. So that is Samplutodaka. So, and these are water bodies which are, I'm not talking about the ocean, not any massive water body like an ocean. These are water bodies with potable water, where the water can be used for drinking. Right? Sarvata, everywhere. So you see water reservoir, wherever, as far as the eye can see, you see that potable water reservoir. Massive lake. So whatever is available in the well or in the stream, that is definitely available. Tavan means definitely available in this massive water reservoir, in the Samplutodaka. So water is available in the Udapana is available in the Samplutodaka. In fact, more than that is available there. The benefit accrued from the small water body is there. More than that benefit is available in the large water body. And Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, he uses this beautiful example, and then he says, in the same way, Sarveshu Vedeshu, the various actions that are prescribed in the Vedas, they are definitely available, Tavan, definitely available to who? To Brahmanasya Vijanataha. Brahmanasya means the seeker of the Brahman. Brahman sadhaka iti Brahmana. The one who seeks Brahman is Brahmana. Anyone who seeks Brahman is Brahmana. So often in the caste system, we get confused that, Brahmanas are a caste. It's not a caste. Brahmanas are not a caste. They were never originally a caste. Later on, it evolved that, the offspring of a German shepherd is a German shepherd. But that's not true. You can't be a Brahmana by birth. So the seeker of Brahman is Brahmana, is what God says. And Vijanataha. Vijanata means one who has awakened to the state of pure consciousness, one who has the Tattva Jnana, one who has the Atma Jnana. That person is Vijanata. So the Brahmanasya, the seeker who has awakened, is someone who has the availability of whatever is there in the Vedas. For such a person, all that is there in the Vedas, that is available in the Vedas, is available to such a person, and more is available to such a person. So with this example, Bhagavan Sri Krishna says that in Karma Yoga, nothing is lost. And by gaining the infinite, the finite is subsumed within. So the effort should be to gain the infinite. And how does Karma Yoga provide this Sarveshu Vedeshu, whatever is there in the Vedas? When you do Karma Yoga, you get Chitta Shuddhi. From Chitta Shuddhi comes Atma Jnana and Ishvara Bhakti. And that then leads to Vijanata, or knowing of all the scriptures. So then by this logic, why can't we just directly focus on Jnana and Bhakti then? Why do we have to do karma? Now God says that because you are in a state where there are still impurities, we are the people who have to realize, each one of us needs to realize whether there are impurities within us or not. And even if there is a little bit of impurity within us, then we are not eligible for anything else but Karma Yoga. That is what Bhagavan says in the next verse. It's a beautiful verse, one of the most popular verses in Bhagavad Gita.
Karmanyevadhikaraste
Karmanyevadhikaraste
ma phaleshu kadachana
ma phaleshu kadachana
ma karma phalaheturvo
ma karma phalaheturbuh
ma te sangostva karmani
ma te sangotsva karmani
कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भो मा ते सङ्गोऽस्त्वकर्मणि.
Karmanyevadhikaraste. Te means for you one whose mind is easily disturbed, one whose mind is sullied from within with internal impurities. And like I said, we have to figure out, or we have to take the guidance of someone who we trust. For that kind of a person, for that te, adhikara, your eligibility, your prerogative, your privilege, your claim, your right is for what? Eva karmani, only for work. The eligibility is only for Karma Yoga, because only that Karma Yoga will bring about that transformation to the mind and intellect, which then will help fine-tuning the mind and intellect and preparing the mind and intellect for Jnana and Bhakti. Without that, if we go and pursue Jnana and Bhakti, it will not be efficient. It will not be productive. It will not happen effectively. Oftentimes we find we are sitting in front of God in the temple, or we are in a church in the altar, and our minds are roaming around here and there, right? It's not going to be efficient. When you train your mind intellect, then only you will be able to pursue Jnana and Bhakti. So at this point in time, this is your eligibility. And then God continues, while you are performing your action, while you are performing your duties, beware. Don't let the mind intellect stray to the thought of what? The result of what will happen. Because again, ma kadachana phaleshu, ma phaleshu kadachana, or ma not, kadachana at any point in time, phaleshu, in the fruits or results or outcome. So your right is not in the fruits or result or outcome at any point in time when you are performing the action. So for example, again, going back to my army days, when we did this commando course, commando is like the counterpart to the American Green Berets. Okay, when we did this commando course, this used to be one of the toughest thing there was this route march, 60 kilometers, carrying a weight of 30 kilograms. Okay, and if you have to clear and if you have to pass, there has to be a slight jog. You can't walk. If you're walking for more than say 10% of the entire 60 kilometers, then you'll fail. So you probably can walk for about 2 or 3% or 5% of the entire route. Beyond that, if you walk, you're done for. You'll fail. So you're 60 kilometers, 30 kg weight, pack with a rifle and all of that, and you're going. And you have to finish it, because if you don't finish it, you'll get relegated. Relegated means you return to the unit. It's called RTU. Return to the unit means you have to come back again. It's a compulsory course, especially if you're in the infantry. Okay, and which means you have to do all the other. So this is one of the most difficult. There are a lot of other difficult things that a commando has to do. So who wants to go back and come back again? Nobody wants to go back, right? So you do it. You do it either for the fear of not getting RTU, or you do it for the sake of doing it. Okay. And the beauty of this, is most of us, when we talk to each other, what we experience is, yes, it is inconvenient. After 10 or 12 kilometers, the pack weight is bothering you. And after some time, it's cutting into your back. You can feel a dampness because it's cut into your skin. Okay. And it is painful, a little bit irritating. And then you want to stop. At some point in time, you say, what, forget this. This is not worth it. I'm going to let them send me. Forget about unit. I'll return to home. And I'm not coming back ever. Okay, that's the thought that comes. Every person gets this thought. Okay, but there's something in you that keeps going. You keep going. You keep going, and after some time, it's almost like a jet aircraft crossing the sound barrier. When the jet aircraft crosses the sound barrier, it's a big threshold. Okay, like that, you reach a threshold. Maybe around half the distance, about 25-30 kilometers into it, you reach a threshold. After which you don't even realize what's going on. You're deep into it. You realize only after you're done and you cross that finish line, you say, oh my God, the last 30 kilometers, I was actually walking or running or whatever. Nothing is known. It's just floating. You're deep into some zone, like maybe the zone that I talked about, the Art and Sena example that I gave. You get into that cockpit and you're in some other zone. So it's a real experience. So how do we get into that zone? I'm sure marathon runners will relate to this. Okay. Because at some point in time in the run, your body says, forget it, enough is enough. And that is why they invented, 10K. So that people who say enough is enough can do 10K. But the guy who sticks to that 42 kilometers, the girl who sticks to that 42 kilometers has completed. And if you leave at 40 kilometers, then what? Around the bend, half a kilometer around the bend or 2 kilometers around the bend is the tape. And you leave at 40, what happens then? You have to strive till the very end. You have to keep striving, keep doing, keep doing. You don't know when you will finish. You don't know when the fruits will come. Just keep going. Ma karma phala heturbu. Let not the fruit or the act of your action, let not the result of your action be your motive. Just do for the sake of doing. So it's like a boat that floats in water, but the water is not allowed to get inside the boat. Similarly, human beings live in this world, but the desires of the world are not allowed to take possession of the human being. Not allowed meaning, if you take that woe that I talked about, if you take that woe, then Nitya Sattvastaha, when you adopt that attitude of Nitya Sattvastaha, then the desires will not take possession. If desires take possession, as much as a boat that has been filled with water will sink in the water itself, the individual who has been possessed by desire will sink in the world itself. And then it becomes a continuous, up and down of the world. The giant wheel syndrome. And what happens if the fruits of action are not your motive? Then that's where Bhagavan comes to next. So let's say we are doing action selflessly. We have adopted that. There is a risk. Okay, and that risk is that people who are doing selfless action could get disinterested in what they are doing. Mate sangotsva karmani. So not for you is the fruits of action, but when the fruits of action is not for you, sangotsva karmani. Sangotsva, sanga astu karmani. Sanga means attachment. Astu means let there be. Karmani in inaction. There is a risk that people who are working selflessly start thinking, what am I doing this for? Why should I do this? What is it going to happen? And then you will kind of be inactive. And you'll stop doing the action. You'll do it slower. There will be inclination towards not doing it. And Bhagavan says, do not develop that. He warns us. Okay, he says, beware, don't do this. The mind and intellect that is selfish, that has a rigor, like I just said a little earlier. That has this rigor to act. It is focused very much on the action because it needs that result. It needs its desires of the fruit. But a mind, but when that happens, the result, whatever the mind gets expended in pleasures. It does not go towards purification of the mind. It is spent away. It is like keeping money in the bank and it's growing or spending it off. So this punya gets spent. It doesn't add. And it does not help in purity. It doesn't add to the purity of the mind intellect. However, a mind intellect which is unselfish, which is working without any selfish desire, the risk is that it shies away from action. It must have the rigor to act. If it does not have the rigor to act, then you will see it. And how will you see it? Because the action will be either not there or it will be imperfect. So such a mind which is not acting is actually not a selfless mind. It is a lazy mind. It is a tamasic mind. That is a tamasic attitude. So how do you distinguish whether a person is actually tamasic or selfless? By the level of degree of perfection in what the person is doing. Perfection is the hallmark of Karma Yoga. Because when you do Karma Yoga for the sake of yoga, for the sake of work, you leave your thumb impression. The thumb impression is the identity. And when I tell my engineers, when you do coding, leave your thumb impression. Because if you leave your thumb impression in your code, you don't need a quality analyst to check it. You need a QA to check it only if your code is not perfect. But if your code is perfect, if you have left your thumb impression, then even if somebody checks it, they will not be able to find any flaws in it. So perfection is the hallmark of Karma Yoga. And perfection in action indicates whether the mind intellect is lazy or tamasic, or it has rigor and is working selflessly. Akarmani also means imperfect action, which is, in addition to inaction, it also means imperfect action. So there was this course in which Gurudev, he, the outcome of the course normally when, people are given their certificates, there is some kind of a test, a Viva voice of what you have read and so on and so forth. There was no such test, there was no such Viva voice. Each person was asked to address envelopes, stamp them and submit it to the administrative office. Okay. And when the envelopes and stamped envelope were received, all Gurudev did was looked at how the address was written, how the name was written, was the spelling right, is the handwriting good or not, was the stamp straight, put in the nice place in a proper manner, was it twisted, was it pasted wherever. So the test was what? The test was what is the perfection in this simple action of writing names in an envelope, addresses and stamping it. And all those where the handwriting was not clear, there were spelling mistakes, stamps were twisted, they were failed in the course. So if someone could not do a simple action perfectly, what had that person learned in the course? Nothing. So that was the measure of success. So perfection is not driven by desire. Perfection is driven by worship. when you have the sense of worship, when you have the Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, then perfection comes into action. And when does the result of action manifest? The result, does it manifest before the action? Does it manifest during the action? It manifests after the action, right? The result comes in, it manifests, we see it only after the action is done. So when I am facing my challenges in the present while I am performing my action, I start thinking and my mental faculties are deployed into something that is not there. It's gonna come later. It's not there now. It's somewhere in the future. Then what would happen? So right now I'm performing action, but my mind and mental faculties are deployed in the result. Then it is going to get unnecessarily or uselessly anxious. And when it gets uselessly anxious, the performance of my current action will not be excellent. It will not have the beauty. So when I'm writing an exam, if I'm going to be thinking about how much marks am I going to get, that's going to impact. I'll probably do 1 or 2 questions less than I would have. I may not have the time to attempt it because I wasted my time, the time that I should have used to attempt the question, I wasted thinking about what am I going to achieve in this examination. So work fundamentally has 2 stages, as we all know. The first stage is planning. Okay, when you are planning, you're collecting data, you are looking at what is the approach that you will take, what are the past experiences, somebody else has done a similar kind of work, gather those kind of information, what will be the various milestones, so on and so forth. The planning phase. The execution phase. The execution phase happens inside the field of action, inside the playground of work. And once you get into the execution phase, into the playground of work, after that, you should not be planning. Planning is a completely different phase. This is what Bhagavan is trying to tell us through this verse. With that, we'll go to the next verse. Yogas tatkuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. So, Kuru Karmani. Kuru Karmani is perform your duties, perform your actions. How? Yogastha. Yogastha means steadfast in yoga. Like Grihastha means steadfast in your homely duties. Vanaprastha, steadfast or seated in the forest. Firmly seated. Steadfast is firmly seated. In what? In yoga. So the attitude of Karma Yoga firmly established in the mind intellect is Yogastha. Kuru Karmani, perform your action with the attitude of Karma Yoga firmly established in your mind intellect. And then what you do? Tyaktva Sangam. Sangam Tyaktva. Tyaktva means abandoning. Sangam is attachment. So perform your actions firmly seated in Yogastha, abandoning the attachments. And attachment to what? Attachment to the burden of the ego, to the burden of doership. I am doing, I am doing, I am doing. To the burden of result. What will happen? What will happen? What will happen? Each one of us, by the way, has some attachment or the other. If somebody says, I don't have attachment, they're lying. Without attachment, one cannot live. Okay? All of us do that. But attachment, thankfully, is a feeling. It doesn't have a physical presence. It's not physical in nature. If it was physical in nature, we would be co-joined twins with the object of attachment. We would be stuck to it. Because we are typically stuck to our attachment. Right? It is a mere thought or stream of thoughts by which we tie ourselves to the things in the outside world. Okay? And without the object of attachment, we feel we are nothing. So in the locality where I live, a few people are very attached to cats. A few people are very attached to their pets, dogs. Few people are very attached to, their cars. Some are attached to father, mother. Some are attached to money, power. Some of our MC, I happen to serve in the MC. Some of us don't serve. We are attached to the power that the managing committee brings to you. Okay, like our politicians. We're attached to the power. Without this, we think that we are even non-entity. So what is this attachment? Attachment is the sense of I, the ego I, and the sense of I want. I plus I want is attachment. Sangam is I, and phalam is I want. So Bhagavan says, Sangam tyaktva, phalam tyaktva. Give up the attachment to both the I and the result. So it's like a driver, you know, in the same locality where I live, I see these drivers. So I am very attached to my car, but my driver thinks the car is his own, you know. He behaves in a manner that the car is his own. He cleans it up like it was his own car. When he goes out, he guards it as if it's his own property. But deep inside, he knows that it does not belong to him. So tomorrow, if he's doing something else, or if he's not there, or if I'm not there, you know, I've left and gone, the car is gone. He doesn't lose anything. He doesn't miss anything because it never belonged to him. But while he's the driver, he is absolutely devoted to that vehicle. That is what God tells us. And then he says, Siddhya Siddhyo, in success and in failure. Siddha, Asiddha. Siddha means accomplishment, success. Asiddha means failure, non-accomplishment. Siddhya Siddhyo, Same Bhutva. Bhutva means being, Same, same. So whether it is success or failure, be the same. How does a person find out if the mind and intellect is the same in both? The disturbances will be minimal. We will ourselves experience the serenity and the calmness, and the others who see us, they will see it visually. For example, those who follow cricket, you see Mahendra Singh Dhoni. Okay, I mean, the guy goes, hits a winning six, and walks as if nothing happened. Gets out, walks as if nothing happened. His body language, both when he hits the winning six and when he gets out, is almost the same. Like when India won the World Cup, he was the captain. After ages, India won the World Cup. Mahendra Singh Dhoni was the captain, and normally the captain gets the trophy, stands with it. It was his duty, so he went and received the trophy and then handed it over to his team member and was standing there. So when I look at it, I think, yeah, this guy has that, you know, Same Bhutva. He feels, whether he gets out or whether he doesn't get out, he feels the same. And Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. This evenness of mind is called yoga. That's what Bhagavan says. Samatvam, evenness, equipoise, yoga uchyate, is called yoga. So hanging in the cross, O Father, you forgive them, for they know not. That is Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. So Vedavyasa, he has given an excellent definition of yoga. It says action done with inner equipoise and serenity, without attachment, being balanced in extremities, is yoga. This equipoise will then help us manage the external situation, you know, the disturbances that come from outside extremely well, with firmness. And the Sakama Karma becomes Nishkama Karma, where you don't have that desire, where you are not stuck in the Trigunya. Durena, we go to the next verse.
Durena Hyavaram Karma.
Durena Hyavaram Karma.
Buddhi Yoga Dhananjaya.
Buddhi Yoga Dhananjaya.
Buddhau Sharanamanvicha.
Buddhau Sharanamanvicha.
Kripanaha Phalahitavaha.
Kripana Phalahitavaha.
Durena Hyavaram Karma. Buddhi Yoga Dhananjaya. Buddhau Sharanamanvicha. Kripanaha Phalahitavaha.
Durena, by far. Avaram means inferior. So far inferior is action, karma. Far inferior is karma compared to Buddhi Yoga. The Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of wisdom, what we have read. The yoga done with Ishvara Arpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi. Far inferior is action compared to Buddhi Yoga. Oh, Arjuna. Dhananjaya is Arjuna. And then he says, Buddhau in Karma Yoga, in Buddhi Yoga, Anvicha, seek refuge, Sharanam. Buddhau Anvicha Sharanam, Buddhau Sharanam Anvicha. In Buddhi Yoga, seek refuge. Because the Phala Hetava are seekers of the fruits or the results. They are Kripana. Kripana means miserable. So, Bhagavan says that much higher than karma is Buddhi Yoga, or karma is much lower than Buddhi Yoga. And seek refuge because of that. Therefore, seek refuge in it. And people who seek the results and the fruits, they are miserable. So, who are the seekers of the fruits? We just talked about Sakama and Nishkama. The Sakama attitude is the seeker of the fruit. And this attitude is opposite of Ma Karma Phala Hetur Bhuhu. It is the opposite. Ma Karma Phala Hetur Bhuhu is Nishkama. Do not seek. God gives that instruction. Do not seek fruits of action. For such people, life becomes that endless merry-go-round. They are not bad people. They are good people. They are doing good action. But they are lost in the desire for result. Seeking joys, seeking pleasures, they are completely lost there. And for them, Bhagavan actually gives a title. Okay, like Mr. or Miss, gives a title. And that title is Kripana. Kripana means miserable, wretched. It comes from miser. Okay, when like a miser you hold on to your desires, you become miserable. Because as much as some of your desires get fulfilled, a lot of your desires are not going to get fulfilled. And when you hold on to it and when they don't get fulfilled, misery comes. So he gives them this title, miserable. So the comparison is inspired work dedicated to a higher ideal vis-a-vis selfish work dedicated to fruits of the work. That's the choice that we have to make. And when we give up karma phala, we get chitta shuddhi. When we get chitta shuddhi, we get atma jnana and Ishvara bhakti. When we have atma jnana and Ishvara bhakti, we pave the way for infinite fulfillment. Not some gain, some loss, some desires fulfilled, some desires not fulfilled. It gives us infinite fulfillment. And that's why Bhagavan says, delightfully give up karma phala. Because when you delightfully give up for karma phala, you have what you gain is something which is incomparable. And that is what he talks about in the next verse.
Buddhi yukto jahatiha.
Buddhi yukto jahatiha.
Ubhe sukrita duskrite.
Ubhe sukrita duskrite.
Tasmad yogaya yujjasva.
Tasmad yogaya yujjasva.
Yoga karma su kaushalam.
Yoga karma su kaushalam.
Buddhi yukto jahatiha. Ubhe sukrita duskrite. Tasmad yogaya yujjasva. Yoga karma su kaushalam.
Buddhi yukto. Buddhi yukto means one who is endowed with this buddhi. With what buddhi? The buddhi of karma yoga, the buddhi of buddhi yoga. Which is what? Ishwararpana buddhi, prasada buddhi. One who is endowed with, one who is yukto of this buddhi, one who has this buddhi, jahatiha, that person gives up in this life. Jahat, iha. Iha is in this what? In this life. So the person gives up. Gives up what? Ubhe sukrita dushkrite. Ubhe means both. Sukrita dushkrite. Punya and papa. That person in this life gives up both punya and papa. So punya and papa are essentially connected with the jiva bhava, the sense of individuality. Nothing but I plus I want. I plus I want is equal to individuality is equal to jiva bhava. Okay? And the result of this connection, this I plus I want is selfish desires. So one who has karma yoga buddhi, this buddhi that God is talking about does not function from the realm of individuality, does not function from the realm of I plus I want, because of which that aspect of punya or merit or the aspect of papa or sin does not exist for that person. We see that. Long back I gave you the Federer example. You see him, calm, collected, equipoised on the, and that's why he's considered the greatest tennis player, among the greatest of all time. Because whether he wins or not, it's the same for him. He's playing for his higher ideal, which is the sport. And when he plays for the sport, is the beauty of the perfection in action, the beauty in action comes across. Therefore, tasmat, yujyasva yogaya. So devote, yujyasva means devote yourself, become inspired in. In what? Yogaya. Yogaya means this yoga. What is this yoga? Karma yoga. And why? For what? Because yoga karmasu kaushalam. This yoga brings excellence, brings dexterity to action. One of the most beautiful verses, when yoga joins with karma, then it changes the texture of action completely. So a person who is, wearing orange robes, okay, typically orange robes are worn by sannyasis, okay, sitting in the Himalayas, but that person's mind is floating around. Hey, the last coffee I had was so delicious. What is the next food going to be? I'm beginning to start feeling hungry, okay. Or, yesterday the group of people who went, they were so charming. So the person is sitting, is supposed to be a sannyasi. The duty of that person is something else, but the person is doing something else. All over, Baushaka, the mind is wandering. And there's another person who's a cobbler sitting in the busiest, junction in Bangalore. And there he's looking at his shoe, completely focused, doing an impeccable job of, of stitching the shoe up. Among these two, the cobbler is a better at yoga, is a better yogi, or is a true yogi compared to the person in orange robe. So this monk and his disciple were walking from one ashram to the other. Okay. And the guru, the monk, was giving sermons along the way. And on the path, there was this river that they had to cross. As they were crossing the river, they heard some screams. And they turned around and saw this young girl who was kind of, fighting with the current, against the current, and trying her best to not get washed away. She was struggling and she was quite desperate. And the other people who were there, they were also desperately watching. No one knew what to do, how to do. Obviously, everyone wanted to save her, but nobody knew what to do. The disciple immediately ran to the girl. He did whatever is required to secure her, picked her up, lifted her, brought her to the shore, saw that she was, swallowed a lot of water, conducted CPR, and ensured she was okay. And once he was convinced that she was okay, he returned to his guru. What he did in terms of the rescue act was perfection in terms of action. It was seen by the people applauding him. Everyone was extremely grateful. The girl's mother was in tears. And everyone, the reaction and the response from the crowd there, it made it very clear for anyone who watched that there was perfection in action in terms of the rescue act. And then they started walking again. But the guru after this fell silent after this episode. When they reached the other ashram, the Shishya, dutifully bought a bucket of water, put some salt in it, and, massaged his guru's feet. And that's when the guru spoke and he said, what you did out there was not right. And the Shishya was, stupefied. He was like, what's he saying? What did I do wrong? Did I say something wrong? Did I not look after the guru? Did I do anything which displeased him? He could not imagine what was wrong. And the guru said, did you notice that this young girl, with wet clothes clinging to her, it was not your job to go and lift her up. Not only that, you touched her, you lifted her up, you took her there and you touched her. You are on the path to become a monk. This action of yours has put you a few steps behind. Now you will have to regroup and come back again. What you did was entirely wrong. The Shishya silently looked up at his Guru, and then he spoke quietly, and maybe he should be the ex-Guru now. And he said, "Sir, I left that young girl in the bank of the river. You are still carrying her in your mind. With you." So yoga converts action from binding to liberating. That is yoga karmasu kaushalam. Sri Ramana Maharishi, one of the most famous saints in India, he said, "Ishvara arpitam na ichchakritam chitta shodakam mukti sadhanam." Ishvara arpitam, dedicated to God, to the Lord. Na ichchakritam, not desiring while acting. Chitta shodakam, purifies the mind intellect. Mukti sadhanam is an aid to liberation. So today we saw two brilliant definitions of yoga by Sri Vedavyasa. The first one is samatvam yoga uchyate, evenness of the mind intellect, equipoise in the mind intellect is yoga. And the second definition is yoga karmasu kaushalam, dexterity in action, excellence in action is yoga. With that, we come to an end of today's satsang. Hari Om. Thank you.
ॐ असतो मा सद्गमया तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमया मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमया ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति 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 हरि ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरि ओम
Hari Om, thank you. So it's almost 5:30. So we'll spend a few more minutes. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
Hi, Uncle. Sakshi here.
Hello, Sakshi.
Hi.
After a couple of weeks.
Yeah, a long time. But I have been doing every session. Yeah. A lot of questions actually coming up from the few weeks. So, we've been seeing how we have to keep ourselves detached from the body, focus on the self. And now again, we see how we shouldn't attach to our desires. So first question is, do we also cover that we have to do this? Now, do we cover how do we do this in the future? Does the book cover that?
Actually, today it covered quite a bit of it, no?
I did.
So, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. And the tips, the 4 tips, that is one big way to help us become detached involvement. That's what I spoke about last time. Detached doesn't mean you leave it and completely go away. You have to be involved. We have to do our work. Work everyone has to do. Okay, even a sannyasi has to do work. Everybody has to do work. So, in being involved in the work, being detached from the fruits of action. So, nirdvandva, nitya sattvastha, niryogakshema atmavan. So that is one of the key ways. So to answer your question, yes, now and in future, when we come to Karma Yoga, the next chapter, this will all be covered in more detail also. So like I said, the second chapter is a summary in pretext, summary in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. So Karma Yoga will cover a lot of what you're asking. Even here, Bhagavan has given us a few tips. This was one of them. Today was one of them. And there are a few more also that we covered in last class, and again there will be more in the next session.
Okay, but in terms of work, it's very easy to distinguish what is your fruit, like what you're desiring for. Right now, I have a decor brand, so I desire for more customers or sales or whatever. But that shouldn't be my end goal, is what you're telling us. I should work because I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and I should only focus on that. now that is still, you can still sort of make sense about it. But for example, the desire of eating or fulfilling your stomach, that is like a daily aspect that our body needs, right? Would you call that we have to get detached from that as well, like that desire to feed ourselves, even if it's like basic roti sabzi, not like fancy Mexican food, even like the basic necessity? Isn't that also a desire to fulfill our body?
Sure. So if we go back to, if we even this is a magical verse what we did today, the first verse we did today. Okay. So of course we have to eat. Of course we have to keep our body healthy. But the reason for eating is to maintain our body. Okay. I live to eat or eat to live is a very common phrase, no, that we hear about.
Yeah.
So when we slip to the undesired aspect of I live to eat, that is when the problem comes. Eating to live is very much something that we must do, because if we don't do that, the body is going to get sick. Then you have not done your duty of looking after it. One of your primary duties is to take care of your body. But coming back, nirdvandvaha, which means any of the extremities. Okay, in work you said, yeah, if I achieve something or don't achieve something, those are the two extremities. But in personal life, it could be, sukha dukkha. Okay. It could be gain and loss. So and there could be other extremities that are not prescribed. There are other extremities that are not, specifically mentioned here. These three extremities more or less cover, they are umbrella. Okay. They cover the others. But in our lives, we have to find out what those extremities are and not swing towards either direction. Same, that equanimity in their presence is important. Similarly, being firm in resolve. So if I am overweight and my resolve is to, lose weight, then if I go and say that, oh, I have to eat because I have to fulfill my stomach, then I'm letting go of my resolve.
Okay.
So we need to use intelligently where we apply these aspects. Like I said, the Vedas give us everything. The Bhagavad Gita gives us everything. How do we choose, and how do we choose to apply? We have to make that choice.
Okay, so like the real life scenario, like suppose, okay, why do people get married then? What is the desire for marriage or having a partner? Now, where does this concept play into that philosophy of relationships, families?
So, I don't know, most people, I think, get married when they don't have the desire to get married. Okay, the majority of people, married people, have not got married because they have desire. Majority of married people have got married even when they didn't have the desire. So there is a society custom and pressure which is bigger than your own desire.
Okay, maybe. Okay, but personally, like for example, now I'm at that phase where I am ready. Like I know, I personally know I do not want to live alone. Like I would like to have a companion. So now it's not the society pressure, right? But that is again a desire. So how do you get detached from that desire?
Sure. So I was just beginning to answer your question. So I said just that majority of married people happen to be married without desire. Okay. But that said, yes, people do desire. Like you said, yes, you having that desire of a companion is fantastic. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay. Now, what kind of a desire is it? Right? That is more important. Like having so are you getting swayed by the extremities, or is it upsetting your resolve in terms of what you're pursuing? Is it not allowing you to do karma yoga? Karma yoga is nothing but doing anything that you do with Ishvara Arpana Buddhi and receiving the result with Prasada Buddhi. That is all it is. Whatever you do. Okay. Sometimes, like I said, so in arranged marriages, when you get married without desiring to get married, love blossoms after the marriage. How does that come? Because the people who have got married against their desire, if it was so, devote themselves and work towards, with that Ishvara Arpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi.
Okay.
So, yes. So, in life, our scriptures don't say that you should not live life. Our scriptures don't say that, you should not find a companion, you should not eat. All it says is existing in this world, interacting with this world, the subject and the object, that interaction is there all the time in various facets. Food is one of them, marriage is one of them. Okay, relationship is a third. Getting into the family that you married to is also a part of it. So all of that is this interaction, this dynamic interaction, which is called life. How do we choose to live that dynamic, interactive life is what the scriptures tell us. The scriptures do not say, don't do this, do this.
Okay, I have one more question. Now, I'm reading a lot about like manifestation and the law of attraction and, the positive energy that whatever you ask from the universe, it gives you, right? Now, if someone wasn't learning about Gita, they would probably manifest about materialistic wants, like, I don't know, a branded bag or a watch or something. I know the Gita covered that, even if you don't want this, don't become detached from your duty to wanting to do that. But sort of that does leave you in the impression that, okay, I don't have to be attached to materialistic needs, so I don't have to work towards it. So I might as well just laze around, do nothing for it.
Exactly, that is what we covered.
Yeah, but I'm not understanding how to not do that.
So, one, all we are learning is, don't do action with your mind on the result. When the result comes, and let's say you got this beautiful Gucci bag, did I pronounce it right?
Yeah.
I hope I did. You get this beautiful Gucci bag, take it happily. Okay, but don't get drowned in it either. Happily take it. So it doesn't say that don't take it with prasada buddhi. Take it, say, thank you God, you gave me this wonderful gift. But while doing your action, don't think about, dream about this Gucci bag. I even practically explained, right? If I'm going to write my exam and I'm going to be thinking about the result, I'll miss 2 questions. It will harm my own performance. That is what God is saying. When you are doing, if you are going to think about the result, you are going to harm your own performance. Okay, that is the biggest risk.
Okay, but
the second part of your question was the other aspect that we talked about, right? If you are doing action selflessly without thinking of the result, then there is always a risk that you'll say, why should I act?
Yeah.
That is when the result of the action, which is in display for everyone, the perfection in action, the beauty in action, that is where that comes into play. So people who are typically thinking, why should I act, and get absorbed into inaction, get into a tamasic kind of a frame, it shows in the output of what they are doing. Whereas people who are working without any selfish motive, but still doing the best, the beauty of the action. I mean, watch that Sachin Tendulkar drive. You think he's thinking whether it's going to be a 6 or a 4? He's just looking at, by the way, first of all, he doesn't have any time to think about the result, because that ball itself is coming at 130 miles per hour. So when life often presents you with situation where you don't have time to think, how come you perform when that small window, perfection in action comes about? And if that perfection in action can come about in the small window, why can't we inculcate it when you have a larger window? Inherently, we are built to be able to do that. Okay. It's just that we lose our way. We lose focus. We get involved and sucked into unwanted things.
Okay. All right.
And when we get the result, enjoy it.
Enjoy it. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
I have a question, Srini. So,
yes.
In verse 45, we are talking about Nistraigunya, which is not being in all 3 gunas, right? But we're also talking about Nitya Sattvastha, being in Sattva also. So how is that different?
Nitya Sattvastha in this context is not the Sattvic guna. Okay. Nitya Sattvastha in this context is being firm in your resolve.
Okay.
It does not refer to the Sattvic guna. It refers to established nature of yoga, yogastva. Okay. So here Nitya Sattvastha is equal to yogastva. It's equal to being firmly established in the resolve. In what resolve? In the resolve of karma yoga, in the resolve of vyavasayatmika buddhi. That is Nitya Sattvastha.
So even the Sattvic state is not, I mean, it's not, you shouldn't be in that. Is that what is being said?
Yes, that is what. So Bhagavan says that it's not don't be in that state. Don't desire that state. Don't desire any of the three gunas.
Okay. Okay.
These are the three gunas which are dwelt with, which are the subject matter of the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas or the Bhagavad Gita, right? Bhagavad Gita is also a Upanishad. Right? So don't dwell in all three of them. Nirdvandva, Nitya Sattvastva, Niryogaksha, Traigunya Vishaya Veda. So all the three gunas. Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. So the bhava, okay, it's not don't be in it. Don't have the bhava. Nistraigunyo bhava.
Okay.
That is the crucial word.
Another question I have is, so we're talking about being detached from the fruits of action, which is very clear. But if we do not get attached or more involved in the work that you do, how can we be passionate about it? So there is still some individuality you bring when you get involved in that work, right? So there is that attachment to the work itself. Maybe you're not attached to the fruits, but it is still there. So is that a good thing? Or like you said, if without that, it will become inaction. It would become like, why am I doing it?
True. So when you are working, when you are working with full faculties in the work, okay, with 100% of your faculties completely absorbed in the work that you're doing, that is called involvement. You're fully involved. Okay. In this context, attachment is to the result. Involvement is to the work. So yes, we must be involved in what we are doing.
But it also becomes your work, right? Is that a good thing? Or
so if my work is something which is apparent, okay, but when I am doing it, if I think this is my work and I want this, the aham mama comes in while I'm doing. So that is one of the crucial aspects there. When you are doing,
okay,
while you are performing the action.
okay.
Yes, the verb aspect of it, okay, which defines your work. Yes, if I'm a batter, because I continued with the Sachin Tendulkar example, yes, I'm the batsman. I'm playing. That is obvious. But when I'm playing, I'm not thinking about I am the batter. I'm the one who scored the century. So I've hit 100 runs. The next ball, I'm not, hey, I have scored century. You know what will happen? The chances are I'll get out if my mind is on my century. My mind needs to be on the work. For 100 runs, I've been focusing on work. The next ball, I think about my 100 and not about the ball that is coming towards me.
Yeah.
The chances are I'll be out.
Okay. Yeah.
So the association of the work with the doer is there for everyone to see, including the doer. But while performing, you don't get into doership. Doership is the problem. The identity of the doer is there.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Srini. You said something about perfection. Perfection is not driven by desire. It is driven by worship or devotion, right?
Right. Yes, I did say that. Yes.
Yeah. So what I would like to add here is, or what I think differently is, to achieve perfection, you also need a certain amount of ambition, some competitiveness, some intellect. And when you say ambition, isn't that a form of desire?
So I'll take the other example that I briefly talked about, the planning stage of work and the execution stage of work. So again, the crucial point here is where is your mind while you're performing action? Okay, that is what is important. Now, if we are devoting our desires to the higher ideal, then yes, that desire is most welcome. That desire will help us function better. But if I'm devoting my desire to a short-term outcome or a shorter result that will give me temporary ephemeral joy, then it is going to get expended. It is going to go away. I will, of course, receive it. I will enjoy it. Even people who do punya karma, good people who do good karma, but their mind is in the result, versus good people who do good karma where their mind is not in the result, is what we have to think about. When I do, as a good person, I do good karma, am I going to think about the result? Or as a good person, when I do good karma, I'm going to think about the higher ideal? Or I'm going to just do work? That is the difference. If I do it thinking about the result, yes, I will receive the joy and it will go away. It will get spent. Whereas if I do the work thinking about the higher ideal or do the work thinking about the work, nothing else, then there is, I'm sure each one of us has experienced it. Okay. Just the sheer joy, we feel that inside ourselves. We feel that serenity. We feel that it happens to us, I mean, when I was once, very in the initial stages after I left the army, I used to do administrative work in an organization. Okay, so one of the I'm not sure if I told you the story. If I've told, it becomes a repeat. I don't think I have. See, one of the problems in the organization was that the phones never used to work. In those days, there was no cell phone. Okay, it was landline, and MTNL was the organization that used to provide. It was a pretty very poor, low service organization. Phones most of the time, phones never worked. If a phone was there, it didn't work for 70% of the time. It used to work for 30% of the time. The people who really got impacted by this were the salespeople. So they used to get really angry. They used to come and yell at us, admin folks and all. It was not really my job. Okay, it was my colleague's job, and we got into a habit of receiving the expletives. Okay, it had become a habit. Okay, fine, phone will not work, they will scream at us. What can I do? The MTNL is a problem. Okay, so but somehow it didn't go well. Something was, I don't know if it was desire, I don't know what it was, but it didn't go well with me. What I did was I started going to work about 2 hours earlier. Okay, and anyway in the army you go at 6 o'clock. So instead of going to the office at 10 o'clock, I would go there at about 7:38. And then I will go to each of these desks, check whether the phone is working or not. And in those days, there was this beautiful, yellow stick, which was a newfangled thing. The Post-it, okay? It had just about come, new invention, It was damn popular. So I'll write in that Post-it, ma'am, your phone is not working. I'll give you update at 11 a.m. Now, the only thing that the phone doesn't work. It will work when MTNL fixes it. But you are not discovering it. I've informed you that it's not working. It just turned the tide. That the same person who used to come and yell at us actually said, hey, I'm going to have samosa at 4 o'clock. Can you please join us? Right? So what I'm trying to say here is, and guess what? All of us were feeling, the feeling was fantastic. Something, inside was feeling great. So and nobody who knew, I just did what I did. I didn't think about the result. It was not my job anyway. Okay. I didn't care about it. If it worked, it worked. If it doesn't work, anyway, the expletives were there. But something I did, I never thought about any action, this thing, but the feeling was very, very nice. So, and there are other examples I'll give you in due course as we go through this, where I've blundered in big way, okay? And the feeling is really, it's quite bad, it's miserable, to use Bhagwan's word, right? So, And when I look back, and if you take stock of when you felt really nice inside and when you felt really bad inside, I can promise you that all the nice ones were when you were not thinking about the result. At least for me. Okay, I'm taking stock of history. Some of the ones when I thought of the result were also gave me nice feeling. But the ones that didn't give me nice feeling were all that where I thought about the result. There's not even one where I worked for a result and, or I thought about that. I worked without thinking about the result and it gave me a bad feeling. Not even. So this is all what we experience in our day-to-day life. It's just that we don't know. If we know, it will be even better.
Thank you.
Hey, Shrini, Deepak here. Yeah, obviously the lesson today was very complicated. So I will, my understanding I will summarize, and then I want you to confirm whether this is a correct understanding or not. Yeah. Very briefly, my understanding is that we have to get unattached to I and my, these two concepts. And the reason for that is, one is that neither I have allocated this work that I'm doing to myself, nor I have control on the result of it. And if I have neither allocated this work to myself, nor I have control on what the fruit of that is, there is no reason to be attached to that. And if this happens, away from I and that ownership, yeah, my work or my karma or my fruit and my result, then yeah, we are moving a step forward. Is that correct understanding of?
I would say it's one of the one of the aspects. Okay, there are other reasons why you may have control, you may not have control. You may decide what you want to do, you may not decide what to do. Even if you decide what you want, even then this is true. Bhagavan is telling us, if you have, Arjuna at that point in time had impurities in his mind. Okay, if you have impurities in your mind, your prerogative, your right is only to work, not to think about the result, not to do anything else. So he's actually dictating to us that in that situation, your right is only to do work. Just focus on doing work, that is all. Karmanye vadikaras adhikaraste and ma phaleshu kadachana. Never think about the phala. And most of us still are, we are all great human beings, very good human beings, but we have disturbances in our mind, which are the impurities. If they are not of the type 2 where it comes from within, the envy, the growth and all that, it is definitely of the type 1 where we get bothered by what happens to us by somebody else. One of the two is definitely there oftentimes. So in that situation, your job is to work.
No, I think, see, understanding the second part is probably easy, where you're saying do the work and don't attach yourself to the result of it. So there is a separation of it, right? But today in Sarika's question and also in Aditi's question and also in my doubt, yeah, I have this bringing in passion, yeah, my ambition, I want to achieve this. This first part of it, it's very difficult, yeah. And how I understand or how I make it understandable for myself is, I'm even saying I have not allocated this work to myself. It is somebody superior who has attached, given this work? So where is the question of I and my in it? In the first part itself. Then
Sure,
comes,
that's a
then
very
comes
good
the
way.
second part, right? That I do the work, I do the karma, and then there is a result. Yeah. So the second part is understand. I mean, it's complicated, but it can be still understood. Yeah. How do you take out personality out of karma itself? Forget about the result of it.
So the method you adopt is, it definitely worthwhile. It is definitely useful. See, none of us, I know that I don't have a choice of where I am. Most of us are where we are. I didn't choose to be born in my family. I didn't choose to be born in India. I didn't choose to do a lot of other things that I've done in my life. I was placed by a multitude of other things that are acting around me, where I was, which position, which situation, expecting, where the world is expecting things out of me. A lot of these things were things which I discovered after I was there in that situation. But once I'm there in that situation, how I respond and what I do is where all this comes about, right? And that is where Bhagwan is saying that tyaktva, sangam tyaktva, phalam tyaktva. Let go of the let go of the aspect of I and I want. Let go the attachment to the I, let go the attachment to the I want. And then you will find that yoga karma sukhaushalam, samatvam yoga uchyate. So all this is beautifully interlinked, okay? And I am saying, and I'm sure all of you have also experienced that in our life, when we look back, all of us are, have sufficient amount of experience in our life. Okay, probably, Sakshi is our youngest in the group, you're right. Even at Sakshi says there is sufficient experience. When I look back, I can see that when I worked for the sake of work, one, the result was better. Okay, the output was, it's shown that dexterity in action was there to see after the work was done. Two, I felt good inside. Both were there. That yoga karma kaushalam was there. The samatvam yoga, the samatvam was also there. So, and why can't I? When I know that, when I've experienced that, when God is teaching that, why don't I proactively try to do it in future actions, situations also? If we can proactively influence ourselves to do that, life will be even better.
We have to do one workshop with you.
Sure. No, even I'm learning, even I'm struggling. I end up, lots of situations, I end up finding myself where I have not done karma with, in the karma yoga manner. I've done just karma. But because I'm reading this, I find that at a very good clip, the transformation of karma into karma yoga is happening, and it makes me feel good. That is happening. And the sheer awareness helps even more.
Sure, yeah, thanks.
Any other thoughts? Otherwise, it's 6 o'clock. We can. Okay, thank you, Hari Om. We will catch up again next Saturday.